What's going on, everybody? My name's Quantum, Master Calibrator here at Quantum TV, and today I'll be giving you a review of the Sony X80K. The short answer, I do recommend it, but I think you will find stronger on the market. So if you're a Sony fan or you're somebody that wants Sony processing, I would say, then this is probably going to be one of your better options for a smaller screen size and things of that nature. So again, smack a like on this video for not wasting your time with the fluff answers that people give you. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and ultimately, at the end, leave it up to you to decide what you want to do. So one of the things I first obviously was met with in the unpacking process was really how plain the packaging looks. So even if you pay the most amount of money for the highest screen size, you're not going to be given any kind of red carpet treatment. So don't expect that. It's just not going to happen. You're going to get a plain cardboard box, and that's just all you get. Now, Sony claims that this is done because of a road to zero. However, if you look at the amount of plastic that they use, I kind of call BS because there is a lot more harm from plastic than there is ink on a box, but I'll digress from that point. More unfortunately is that there is no adjustable footprint, so you have to have a really wide media console if you get a bigger screen size, or you have to wall mount. There's really no way around that, so yeah, definitely take that into consideration when buying this television. As far as reflection handling, it's basically a mirror. There isn't anything that's redeeming about, the kind of glare that you're going to get out of it. There's no real moment where you can get around that even. It's pretty bad. So if you have a lot of windows, this is immediately probably going to be a hard pass for you because the anti-glare technology is reserved for the higher end models. Now, unfortunately, they force terms of service on you out of the box. So even if you're using it offline, you have to, again, submit to Google's terms of service. And that means voice data storage and things like that. So read through those terms of service, but I mean, it's one of those things I really hope goes away, but you really don't have a choice. So if you don't like that kind of thing, you're going to basically have to pass on every Google TV nowadays because they're really strong with forcing that aspect of you doing exactly what you're told on you as a customer. And I can't stress how annoying it is for me to keep going through that through the years because I'm like the only person that talks about this. So hopefully it gets fixed. Now, in terms of the out-of-the-box experience, it was actually pretty impressive to see that this TV doesn't take a lot to get to a good level and a really enjoyable picture quality. So within a couple of clicks, you're up and running and you're going to have a lot of fun. However, if you want to go beyond reference, that's where you're going to need my settings, which I do offer here on the channel for $5. You can join the membership and you'll be good to go. I'll put the link below. Essentially, though, the calibrated performance is incredible. You have really beautiful picture quality, and compared to even the LG C1, which is the best TV I've ever seen, it stood up to it pretty well in my personal opinion. It's obviously no OLED, but it definitely did its good deeds there in the areas of picture quality I was looking for. Now, don't mishear this. When I say it's no OLED, I don't want you to think like OLED is the end-all, the be-all, and it's perfect and it has no flaws. I just mean that in the sense of contrast and clarity, depth, things of that nature. But again, this TV held its own pretty decently. So again, for the price point, I think that's a win for this level of Sony television. Now, as far as the picture presets, you do have a plenty of picture presets. So again, you can set one up for movie, for gaming, all the stuff that you've come to expect. You're not really missing out anything major there. In terms of black levels are where you're going to find your first major detractor here, and it's just gray black. Now, at a glance, it's going to be very easy to notice this in a dark room. So if you're somebody that watches majority of the time at night or in a dark room, this is probably not going to be your strongest TV. You're definitely going to want to spend a little bit more money and get something a little bit better, or go to a manufacturer like TCL or Hisense and get one of their options, which absolutely destroy this TV for about the same price. So in terms of gray uniformity, it's pretty clean. There's no vignetting or dirty screen effect. Now, if you're new to these terminologies and all this jargon, all that really means is you don't have any dirty spots on your screen or blotchiness to your screen or anything like that that'll throw you off and look really bad. It's very obvious when you have it, and again, this TV doesn't have any of that, so don't worry about it. What you do have is slight vignetting in the corners, but again, it's nothing that defeats the picture quality, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Now, in terms of brightness, this is where I was most impressed because brightness can be determined in a couple different ways, but instead of applying just an overall brightness to the entire screen, there's actually some form of intelligent highlight placement here, and that things that need a strong highlight actually gets the highlight boost. So that is really good to see at Sony's entry model into their Bravia line, if you will. I call it that because the X800 series is usually what, their entry point is. Now, I know this is the X80, but the X80 replaced the X800 series, so that's just kind of my backlog of knowledge. Be that as it may, though, the highlights are the thing that really impressed me the most, and there's tons of kick, even again compared to an OLED. So that is really good to see that coming out of this price point. Now, shadow detail, I didn't have any black crush or any major issues there. There are no major defects like posterization. So again, if you're not familiar with this jargon, all that is just, again, the screen looks dirty and it looks like your colors and your details and your information and your picture quality is distorted. You don't have any of that, right? Now what you do have is banding. So you will have banding because there is no smooth gradation feature. That unfortunately is reserved for the higher end models. While we're on the topic of what you don't have local dimming. So you can't expect any kind of dimming on any level. It's just going to be the baseline contrast ratio of a little over 4600 to 1. That's all you get. So if that's not enough, then that's going to be the part where you're definitely going to have to bow out. Now, for those who are inquiring if the gray black is because this is an IPS panel, I did whip out the old microscope and do the old checkaroo, and this is in fact a VA panel. So you don't have to worry about IPS. I'm pretty sure the aspect or the contrast ratio would have been somewhere in the ballpark of maybe even 2,000 or 3,000 to 1 if it were an IPS. So again, VA kind of saving this model really, really clutch. In terms of input lag, that was another really good showing for this TV. It actually measured at a little over 11 milliseconds, and that's really great for this price point because not even the LG C1, from my perspective of gaming on a regular basis, was able to maintain that. And I think that's really good. I think the LG C1 was like 14 milliseconds where this is at 11. So that's, again, very impressive. Now, in terms of the motion capabilities of this display, it's really fluid. So if you're somebody that likes the, as they call it, soap opera effect, which is basically Sony's motion flow technology, their motion processing. Every manufacturer calls it something different, as we know, or if you don't, now you do. I mean, it's really fluid, and I absolutely love it. Now, unfortunately, this isn't a 120 hertz panel for gamers who want 120 hertz. But if you are a gamer or a movie enthusiast that either you're gaming on the gaming side at 60 FPS, and that's all you ever do, 4K 60, or you're watching a movie, which is never more than 24p, then you're 100% fine with this. And the fluidity added by things like even their, motion, what is it, their X Clarity. They change these names so often, but their X Clarity looks really good this year, and I think you're really going to enjoy what they've done because, again, you don't really lose too much brightness, and if you want to be more aggressive, you can. It adds a ton more clarity, and it doesn't flicker to the eye, so it looks good. Now, again, in terms of, things not to expect a whole lot from, don't expect a whole lot from the internal speakers. But at the same time, it does add a little bit of thump to your sound, so it's not as crappy as we've seen from this price point before, where things usually just are a tinny mess, and you just have to basically forget about any hopes of having decent audio. So that's a good thing there, but then moving on to kind of like a little bit more of a negative thing, I would say like the user interface. It's the Google platform, and it doesn't really offer a whole lot if you don't go online. So again, if you're an offline user, you won't really have access to a ton of features, so that's something to think about. But it does all the basic stuff, so can't really gripe too much there. As far as USB playback, it's a bit choppy, and it does tend to freeze a bit, so I don't really recommend it for people who have a big collection of digital media that they store on USB devices. I would just pass altogether if that's how you're watching this. In terms of burn-in, it's not an OLED, so you don't have the risk of burn-in. You don't have to worry about that. And the weight is pretty good, so if you're moving it from room to room, you don't have to worry about throwing out your back or anything like that. So the design is pretty much the same that you'd find on pretty much higher-end TVs. They've got this checkerboard kind of grid-style backing to it. It actually matches the same kind of premium flow we've seen on TVs as high up as the X80J, or A80J rather. So I think that's really good that we can see that kind of like premium design quality, being brought to a more entry-level type television. So again, very good there. I mean, all things considered, from a price to value ratio, I do think they are delivering what they can do best for their level of what they're willing to offer you. But as far as the 2022 market, this is not the best you could do for $1,000. You have TVs like the Hisense U8G. You have TVs like the TCL S546 even. And I'll be very honest with you, if I had to pick between the TCL S546 and this, which those are 2021 TVs, the S546 and the U8G, I would pick the S546 because it just gives you more features and more picture quality that's way too equivalent to this to justify spending more money on something like this, if that makes sense. Now again, this isn't a bad TV. I've actually been pretty impressed with it, and this is the most impressive X80 series television I've ever seen, slash X800 series television I've ever seen. It's a real leap forward in the right direction for this particular line, but Sony is a little bit behind the times in the sense that they really need to start adding local dimming as a standard across every single LED they offer, because local dimming is not some flagship feature anymore. Maybe in 2016 when the technology was like first taking off, but time's out for this. Like, we just have basic TVs with no kind of dimming features. It's a little gimped. And then you also, on the HDR side, don't have a whole lot. This TV doesn't measure too bright. It's only 394 nits for my measurements. So there's a lot to leave desired here, and that's for HDR and SDR. Doesn't really matter. Again, they place the highlights where they need to be, but the screen's overall brightness is nowhere near the flagship level. You can't expect that, but it's also hitting well below what we normally see out of these TVs, which is an average of 500 to about 600 nits. So this is like way lowballing below what even average TVs at this price point do. And especially if you start looking at other TVs like that Hisense, you're going to really start to see what I'm talking about. I think the moral of the story here is that this is just Sony trying to take baby steps towards where everybody else is kind of already at. And for that, I think if you're a Sony fan, I would recommend it, but for everybody else who maybe might be a little bit more adventurous with their purchase, you can find easily a better TV for less money, and that's as honest as anyone's going to tell you. So now it's up to you to decide what you want to do. That's pretty much everything I kind of had the time to look at and assess and things like that. It'll be fine for next-gen gaming. You won't have any issues with that. Just, again, don't expect Dolby Vision Gaming or 120 hertz, you know, stuff like that. Like, just keep it 4K 60, which is what these consoles are doing now anyway, especially with like 4K 30 happening more and more with these games as they push for graphics over performance. So seriously, can't stress that enough. But again, that being said, I want to thank you guys so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty, and let me know what you guys thought about this television and what you guys will do down below. Until the next video, I'll see you guys later.